Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and as always, plenty of entertainment. It has been a hectic few weeks since the last episode of the podcast, and unfortunately, I ran out of time to get an episode released last month. But it's a cracker of a chat this month, which I know you will enjoy. September was my busiest month this year with multiple events on the schedule in Ireland, England, France and Belgium. It was hectic at times, but I loved it. There were plenty of highlights and pinch me moments over the past 8 weeks, but the standout moment is without a doubt calling the 2024 VinFast Ironman World Champion Laura Philipp across the line in Nice on an incredible day of racing for the women of our sport. It's hard to put into words what it means to call the world champion across the finish line and to witness firsthand, up close and personal, the sheer emotion and elation of the newly crowned world champion in that incredible moment when she broke the tape to win the race. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. The racing in Nice was amazing, from Laura Philipp being crowned world champion for the first time right through to the very last athlete who conquered the course. You couldn't but be inspired by the sheer grit, determination and courage on display across the board by the amazing women on race day. I landed in Kona on Sunday for the Men's Ironman World Championship race this weekend, and it's shaping up to be another epic race day. And again, I'm sure there will be plenty of highlights across the week and indeed on race day. Being in Kona as part of the World Championship announcing team is in itself a definite highlight of the year. My own swim and bike training has been seriously lacking of late. I have managed to keep up some running whilst I've been travelling, and it's going surprisingly well. I even managed a random 11k on a whim when I was working in the UK in September, and then last week ran a casual 10k in Alicante. I was buzzing after both of those efforts. I've been ticking along, getting some steady but short 5 to 8k runs done over the past few months since Ironman 70.3 Mallorca, so stepping up in distance without much thought or effort. I was well chuffed with myself, and my legs weren't too banjaxed after, which was a bonus. I think the Nuasan CBD muscle gel definitely helped with my recovery. I took to the pool in Galway last week to get some swimming in, cramming for Kona. I haven't swam since the end of July, so I needed to make sure I could swim to the coffee boat in Kailua Bay this week. Another one of those must-do things when you are here at the World Championship. Before we dive into this episode, don't forget to pop over to the Nuasan website to check out their brilliant range of products. And I know we are still a few weeks away from Christmas. Yes, I said the C word, but it's never too early to start thinking about those gifts for friends or family, or even a treat for yourself. So be sure to pop over to www.nuasan.com and use the code TTS15 to get 15% discount online. Now let's jump into this brilliant episode with Paul Kaye, one of the best known and much loved voices of Ironman, a proud South African who from a very young age was well travelled and exposed to many places, faces and cultures, which helped to shape his love of travel and ability to connect with people from all over the world. His background in broadcasting and his passion for sport has seen him carve out a career in the endurance industry that saw his hobby turn into his profession. And since pivoting into his role as an Ironman announcer, he has played a significant role in raising the game for others to follow, in elevating the athlete experience on race day at Ironman events all over the world. A two-time Ironman, Paul returned to racing this year, taking part in Ironman 70.3 Belgium last month. In this episode, he reflects on the transformative power of sport and of Ironman specifically, sharing deeply personal stories of overcoming challenges, and highlights the importance of having a profound why to push through adversity. The episode is filled with motivational insights and underscores the unifying and life-changing impact of Ironman on both individuals and communities alike. It's a long episode, but it's a great episode. Now go grab a cuppa and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast. We finally have one of the most amazing voices of Ironman on the podcast. Paul, where are you in the world?
Well, that's a hell of an intro. Thank you very much. Coming from the best Irish voice on the microphone around the world. I am in a place that feels very, very much like home. I am in Cascais, which is about 40 minutes away from Lisbon in beautiful Portugal, on the Atlantic Ocean. And the reason it feels so much like home is because where I come from, Cape Town, it's on the Atlantic Ocean. And obviously we have a strong Portuguese influence, with Bartholomew Dias having discovered Cape Town and South Africa, etc. So, and I've been here since the very, very beginning, and I've been here every year. So yes, feeling very at home at one of my favorite race hotels on the tour, the Quinta da Marinha.
Very nice. And what's the weather like over there?
Irish weather.
Which is?
It's a grand, soft day. I hope I got that right, Joanne.
You did. So technically it's raining.
What do you mean technically? So even yesterday when we were coming into land, and when I say we, it's DJ Danley and myself, we were coming into land, and the captain comes on and says, look, we're a bit delayed. We have to fly a holding pattern. There's an insane rain shower over the airport at Lisbon. And the drive from Lisbon airport to Cascais was a slow one because the Portuguese, like the South Africans and the Spanish, I think, don't drive well in bad weather because they're not really used to it. Sorry to the Portuguese and the South Africans and the Spanish. Actually, sorry, not sorry. Anyway, and it was a slow drive. It was super misty. There was lots of rain. But fortunately, we were being driven by Nirvana, and all the Nirvana team come from Newcastle. And so for them, that's their normal, right? And then today we started the day, Dana and I, with a lovely run. We had humid weather, and then the heavens opened up when we were on our scooter down to the race village for the briefing. And when we opened up the expo, it was blue skies and sunshine. But again, now it is raining. But that's all good because on Saturday, which is race day for the Ironman 70.3 and for the Ironman, it's going to be perfect.
And it's a very busy weekend because Portugal has, is it 5,000 athletes over the weekend?
Close to 5,000 athletes because we call it a festival weekend. We run the Ironman 70.3 and the Ironman concurrently. 70.3 will start first, then the Ironman. We have about 4,500 athletes from 97 countries.
That's a massive race.
So not many people really get that. So, people think, like you think a marathon, you think, let's say London or Boston or New York, and you think, wow, 40-odd thousand people do that. People think the Cape Town Cycle Tour, which is 30-odd thousand people. And then you go, well, geez, what's 4,000, 4,500 at an Ironman? But at an Ironman or an Ironman 70.3 event, anything over 2,500 athletes is a really, really big race, especially if you consider it's non-drafting. So everybody's got to be 12 meters apart. It takes a lot of road to separate everybody. And it just so happens that here in Cascais, as we have in Italy and as we had in Spain and a couple of other regions, I know in Australia and in New Zealand, it's fairly popular to run a 70.3 and an Ironman simultaneously because it's the same resources, the same road closures. It's a big thing. It's a big race. And as you well know, Joe, you've been here. It's a very, very long day because we start the Ironman 70.3, then there's a short gap, then we start Ironman. And as they're rolling in, the Ironman 70.3 athletes are coming out of the water. As the Ironman athletes are coming, last athletes are coming out of the water, so the 70.3 athletes are not far away from finishing the bike. Then the Ironman athletes, they're on the bike. Ironman 70.3 athletes are on the run. Ironman 70.3 athletes are finishing the run. The Ironman athletes are on the run. And oh my goodness, it just doesn't stop.
You lost me at the Ironman 70.3 start line. And I do the job you do.
Exactly. I mean, it's huge and it's a big weekend and it's big for the athletes. It's great in terms of, every athlete's bringing spectators with them. So it creates this wonderful energy of a lot of people. The people here in Cascais and the communities through which we race really get involved and support the race. I mean, the volunteers are phenomenal. The spectators are great. And it's just a huge, huge day. So whilst the numbers sound small compared to a marathon, it's really, really big in terms of an Ironman. And the only thing bigger is the 2 days of the Ironman 70.3 World Championship, which in this year will be in Taupo, New Zealand.
And that won't be very long coming around. And we'll talk in a few minutes about the Ironman World Championship because by the time this podcast is released, hopefully we will both be in Kona. We'll be counting down to the men's edition of the VinFast Ironman World Championship. But before we get to talk about all of that, I really want to come back and talk to you about your own background in announcing and in the media and broadcasting, because although this is the 10th anniversary of your very first time in Kona in 2014, you've been involved in the world of endurance sport for quite a long time. So bring us right back to where this all started and how you've ended up on this amazing tour every year for so many years.
Well, like anyone really, everything that has happened in your life conspires to make you who you are in this moment, and to a large degree what you do. You know, I come from a multicultural family, a German dad and a mum who was half Italian, but born in South Africa, and half British actually, but via Zimbabwe. I was born in Durban on the KwaZulu-Natal province, the east coast of South Africa. Lived there for 6 years. We then moved to Johannesburg, which is up north on the reef. We then ended up in Germany. I learned to speak German growing up in Japan. Lived in Tokyo for 5 years. Moved back to South Africa. My dad was in the photographic industry, but a semi-professional jazz musician. My mum was very creative in the kitchen. She was very much a Mother Hubbard. You could put her in an empty kitchen and somehow she'd create a feast. And through the traveling and through the diversity of my parents and my upbringing, and through the diversity of growing up in a country like South Africa, which very few people realize how diverse it is. Essentially, we're 11 tribes and we have 11 languages. It's made it really easy for me, in inverted commas, to move from country to country and move from culture to culture and absorb it and embrace it and learn from it. So, those elements of my life have conspired towards who I am and what I do. At school, sport was compulsory at school in South Africa. You had to play a winter sport and you had to play a summer sport. In winter, I played hockey because my mum wouldn't let me play rugby. She had no idea how dangerous a hockey stick and hockey ball was. She thought rugby was dangerous. And in summer, I played water polo and I did track and field and athletics. I loved my bicycle. I was always on my bike, but I never considered myself to be an athlete, never considered myself to be sporty, but I loved sport. And then I was in Japan, I was in the choir. So perhaps that singing somehow then has helped me now. And then I was in the band. So music's always been a part of my life. And because I loved music, I gave up university to become a radio DJ. And at the age of 20, I was the youngest person in South Africa on FM stereo on a commercial radio station in my country, which was a big deal. FM stereo, commercial radio station. I was 20 years old. And this was 1990. This was before we voted for democracy on the 27th of April, 1994. I was a radio DJ on weekends and working for my dad in his photographic business during the week. And then I ended up doing the sportscasts for the morning drive show and the afternoon drive show. And then through this, people associated my voice with sport. And then I started being invited to sports events and kind of doing some mild MC work. But my announcing career kicked off on the 1st and 2nd of December, 1990. I was invited by a chap who liked the sound of my voice, liked what he heard in radio. And I went to commentate in a small town called Langebaan on our west coast. We call it rubber duck racing. Now, please don't laugh out loud. It's not that little yellow thing that floats in your bath. It's 4.5 meter inflatable power boats with 30 horsepower and 50 horsepower motor engines on them, outboard engines. And essentially, it's motocross in the surf at sea. I just turned 21 and I did 2 days of commentating boat racing. And it was a baptism of fire because if anybody who knows their rugby from the 90s and the 80s, you would know the name Rob Lowe. Rob Lowe was a Springbok rugby player. He was a lock, a hero in our country. And when he gave up playing rugby, he started racing boats and he started building boats. And on this second day, on the Sunday, he got thrown out of his boat and he got run over by another boat and the prop tore him to shreds. Fortunately, he was saved by another pilot who pulled him on the boat, brought him to the beach. And in those days, we used to have surf lifesavers in helicopters. They came by helicopter, flew him to the hospital. 11 liters of blood later, they managed to save his life. But for me, that was the ultimate baptism of fire because here we're having this disaster, near tragedy, which completely dampened the spirits. And now you've got to get back on the mic and you've got to get the racing going and you've got to re-energize people. So that was my introduction to announcing. And I did that. My 10,000 hours, I did that for 7 years, almost every single weekend of every summer in South Africa, free of charge. That's how I got into announcing, because of my radio career, being involved in sport and enjoying sport. I got involved in triathlon because I was the on-the-ground color presenter for the live TV coverage of the Cape Town Marathon. And the chap who was producing that is actually the guy who owns the production company that does the incredible videos around the Cape Epic, our epic mountain bike series racing, and the incredible videos around the Ironman South Africa events. And at the time, he was working for a production company that produced a program called The World of Endurance. And one of the sports they focused on was triathlon. And one of the things they covered was a South African-based international sprint triathlon series in South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Mauritius. And he wanted a fresh face and a new voice for the TV program. This is the summer of 94, 95. Keep in mind, Southern Hemisphere, so different summer to Northern Hemisphere. And he said, do you want to give it a go? And I said, sure. And this is the day of Betacam VTs and rolling the tape backwards and forwards. And it took days to record programs. And he sat me in front of a TV and he said, we're going to push play. You must talk to pictures. No script, nothing. I started being the voice of that program. So much so that the title sponsors a couple of years later really enjoyed what I was doing and invited me to the opening race in Mauritius in 2000. I just turned 30 and my son had just been born the year before. But I was now the station manager of the radio station, was no longer on air. And sitting behind a desk, 15, 16 hours a day, the waistline was spreading, wasn't super fit. But my son being born, I thought to myself, I want to be a fit, active, participative father. And so when he's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 15 or 20, he wants to kick a ball, run around, ride a bike, I need to be fit enough to do that. So I decided I need to get fit. And this coincided with me being invited to Mauritius to the opening race. And the pros started taunting me like, so you sound like you know what you're talking about, but have you ever done a triathlon? And the answer to that was, no, I've never done a triathlon. So I did my first triathlon, a sprint. It was a 600-meter swim, 20K bike, 5K run on the beautiful island of Mauritius. I borrowed the hotel's mountain bike, which was a farm gate with wheels. The pedals were bent on the cranks. It weighed probably more than the moon. Wearing a Speedo, once you picture it in your mind, you'll never get the picture out of your mind. An elastic band as a race belt, and the event cotton t-shirt. I was last out the water, last off the bike, second last to finish. As a matter of fact, when I was running through the 8 stations, they were picking up the cones. That 5K run took me 31 minutes. Fell in love with the sport even more than ever before, went home, bought my first road bike, entered my first bike race, did my first half marathon, and started doing lots of small triathlons around South Africa. But now people really associated me with the sport. And the first time Ironman came to South Africa, it was hosted in a small town called Gordons Bay, which is very close to Cape Town, but it's on the Indian Ocean of Cape Town because we've got the 2 oceans, the Atlantic and the Indian. The first year I was just the voice for the TV program, a 1-hour documentary. The second year I was one of the announcers, and that was 2001. So I announced my first Ironman in 2001. Then Ironman left South Africa because the rand-dollar exchange rate went crazy. The owners couldn't afford to buy the Kona slots, really, and couldn't afford the prize money. It came back to South Africa in 2004 as a test event, which was my first Ironman 70.3. And my second one, as you know, was with you in Belgium now, just a few months ago. In 2005, it was the first full Ironman back on South African soil, this time on our Indian Ocean in Port Elizabeth, now known as Tibega. And again, I was just the voice for the TV show. And I started becoming one of the announcers with a German announcer called Mike from 2006. And I have announced every Ironman in South Africa since 2006. We started our first proper Ironman 70.3 in 2008. I've announced all of those. My first international Ironman on the microphone was Ironman Austria 2010. And that was the embryo that became my involvement in the Ironman Europe Tour, which was signed at the inaugural Ironman Wales, Tenby, Pembrokeshire in September 2011.
So Tenby 2011 was your first real step into the European tour. And really, when you think about it, both of our careers kind of started there, didn't they? Because I had started in Ireland in Galway 2011. I didn't meet you until Bolton the following year, but we've both been then kind of dancing around the Ironman finish line really for the last, how many years is that? What do we say on the finish line? If I was any good at maths, I'd have a proper
I'd
job.
have a real job.
Yeah.
So what happened was I raced Ironman Austria in 2008, and I did it again in 2009, and that's a whole separate story in terms of my why. And when I arrived in 2009 to race the race, Helge Lorenz said to me, "Don't you want to rather announce?" And I'm like, "Helge, I've trained so hard for this. I'm going to race it." I should have actually taken up his invitation because I had a brutal day, almost 14 hours. I had a nightmare marathon. But that's when they said, "Okay, we're gonna hire you for 2010." And in 2010, I think a couple of people noticed. I think Kevin Stewart was there and he saw me and he thought, And then a couple of people in 2011, when I went back to Ironman Austria, noticed this is different. And Helge's thinking was, we want to make the races feel international. And we want a native English speaker at our races. And we want that person at as many races as possible to give it that certain feel. Kevin Stewart also thought, well, we have English language announcers in the UK, but we need somebody with a different accent because that'll give it the international feel. And they had Whit Raymond from the US already, but things were changing. Essentially, Ironman used to be a franchise business. It was licensees. Then Ironman bought all the licenses back and created essentially regional offices. So quite a lot changed. And I suppose my timing was amazing because I'd given up my corporate job in December 2009 and I'd made myself available to see whether my hobby of announcing could be my living. In 2010, I was signed up for Ironman 70.3 St. Pölten, Ironman Nice, Ironman Austria. At Ironman Austria, Kevin Stewart contacted me and said, "Please, how about being at the inaugural Ironman Wales in Tembe?" And I said, "Well, that's great, but how about I meet your team at Ironman UK Bolton?" And so, I went from one international race in 2010 to 5 in 2011. And I remember, I'm sure it's called the Crabtree, the little restaurant in Tembe, up there in the little bay window, Helge and myself, and he said, "I'm creating something called the Ironman Europe Tour. I'd like you to be the voice. I think I can give you 8, 9, maybe 10 races for the year. It'll mean being stuck in Europe." I'm like, "That's fine. My wife and I will be there. We're coming." And that's when it started. And it just snowballed from then. Not only me getting, great races to go to, but triathlon as a sport and endurance sports exploded in, 2010 onwards. And I was very, very, very blessed to be available and to be multilingual, which I think helped a lot as well, and to be willing. And off I went. And my goodness, the train left the station at speed, let me tell you.
The train hasn't stopped rolling, luckily enough, even with COVID and everything that brought, and I'm sure you felt similar to how I felt during COVID when things stopped. It was like, God, will we ever get back to this? And thankfully we did. You mentioned a couple of things there, Paul, in terms of one, the opportunity landed for you. You were available to actually go on the tour and that the sport exploded. But I think what also is important is your passion for the sport and your passion for Ironman and for the athletes that you meet, because it's not just a job for you. It is, aside from your family, it's your whole life. Being part of the Ironman community, it's a huge part of your identity and it's a huge part of your life.
Weirdly, and this is going to sound so, I don't know, pathetic in a way, but I've always wanted to be a positive influence and a positive force and somehow make the world a better place. And that can be very overwhelming because you look at the world and you think, well, how can I do anything? But I just remember hearing this amazing story about starfish. And after a big storm, this couple are looking from their balcony in their hotel down at the beach. And there's a gentleman walking down the beach. And all these starfish have been washed ashore. And they noticed that he's chucking the starfish one by one back into the water. And they were so curious, they went down, to go ask this gentleman, what on earth are you doing? And he says, well, I'm throwing the starfish back in the water. He goes, but why? He says, well, they're washed up. They're going to die. I want to save them. And they said, but you can't save them all. And then he picked up the next starfish and he threw it in the water. But he says, I can save this one. And I think triathlon and Ironman specifically is an amazing metaphor for life. What you go through in that one race is an extremely concentrated version of what you go through in life. And one starfish at a time, you can change the world. And one swim stroke at a time, you will finish the swim. And one pedal stroke at a time, you'll finish the bike. And one step at a time, you'll finish the run. But often in life, we reach these hurdles and we think we can't. But if you just somehow keep moving, you always can. So I love that about Ironman. And Ironman changed my life. And I love being there. And you can see it on every finish line. You can see that moment in that person's body language, in their face, in their eyes, when they suddenly realize they can and they have, and how it changes them. And so many people tackle a challenge like an Ironman because of something that's happened in their life, and they don't believe they can, or they need the distraction, or they need to prove that they're alive. And to be a part of those people's journeys, because I always say, as an announcer, on the finish line of an Ironman, we are essentially the exclamation mark at the end of the words, you are an Ironman. We are the ribbon, the bow in their journey. And that's a huge privilege. There are too many people that I see, and I digress now, in who do what we do in our sport and other sports, who are there for themselves and for the platform it gives them. And maybe they get famous and maybe they get sponsored. But you can't be a good Ironman announcer if that's your goal. You need to be emotionally in the game. You need to be invested. You need to love what you do, because what we do is extremely, extremely hard. It's mad long days. And if you don't love it, you can't do it well. And it's such an honor and a privilege to be inside the ropes and to be such a critical part of somebody's life in that moment that you must never take that for granted. And you need to be super humble in what you do. And I love that I get to be a witness to lives being changed. In my own small way, I go, okay, maybe I am making the world a better place. And on that topic, I think it's Nelson Mandela who said that sport is the world's greatest peace movement. Not sitting in a grandstand watching a football match. Not sitting at home watching an F1 Grand Prix. Mass participation in endurance sport. When you come together, I'll use the Comrades Marathon in South Africa as an example, 22,000 people running 90 kilometers. You've got poor gardeners who can't afford the shoes on their feet, and they were probably given them by the person whose garden they look after, running shoulder to shoulder with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And they are equal for those 90 kilometers. We have 97 countries here at this race. We had 91 at Ironman Barcelona 2 weeks ago. On the beach, they're equal and they're united. And I believe if more of us did endurance sport, if more of us suffered together in a nice way, like an Ironman, I believe we'd make the world a better place. So what we do is a privilege and an honor, and knowing and recognizing that privilege and that honor and loving what you do makes it possible to do what it do. And it is all consuming and it becomes your life.
It certainly does. And Paul, one of the things that not only you do so well is that finish line sense of occasion, but actually is the start line. You look at Barcelona 2 weeks ago, the words that you spoke at that start line that I have seen shared on social media so many times gave me goosebumps as I sat on my phone scrolling through Instagram. Talk to me about where the inspiration for those words come from. Now, you've mentioned it slightly here. You talk about the power of sport and the power of unifying together through sport. Where does all of that come from? Because that is a very special talent.
So firstly, I'm not a politician. I am apolitical. I'm a human, and I want humans to live a little bit better. I'm very pro-planet. I think there's so much more we can do to make this world a better place, not just human to human, but how we coexist with nature. In South Africa, in all our game reserves and in our conservation, we always talk about you need to connect to protect. And in a sense, that's part of my inspiration. Some people think that I script this. It's not scripted. It's a combination of many, many things. It's just like to succeed in your race, you need to have trained hard. You need to have done well in your swim, your bike, and your run. You need to have figured out your nutrition. You need to have a reasonably good day weather-wise. And lots of things come together to create the moment. Not all races understand the sense of occasion. For me, and for some of the race directors more than others, there's the realization that for those 3,000 people standing at that swim start, that is their Olympics. That is their World Cup, their World Championship. They've committed so much to be there in that moment. And I think one of the things that Ironman, generally speaking, does really well is that sense of occasion. You know, we generally have great sound systems, we have LED screens, we have good announcers, we have good music, and we have those words that Mike Riley invented. Thank you, Mike. You know, you are an Ironman. And all these things elevate Ironman to another level. But then when you take a race director who's equally passionate and committed to the athletes, this is not a business, this is a commitment, this is a passion, who understands the power of production, the power of music, the power of the right sound system, designed properly, positioned properly. The athletes, we were on a tower, the athletes were positioned around us. Mega line array system. I mean, huge setup. The power of music, to give the music a chance to get under the neoprene and under the skin and into the heart. And I mentioned my dad having been a semi-pro musician. Now, my dad was born in Frankfurt. Hans Zimmer was born in Frankfurt. My dad was not a classically trained musician. He was self-taught. Hans Zimmer, self-taught. So there's some analogies there. I'm not going to compare my dad to Hans Zimmer. But so I have an affinity for Hans Zimmer. I love very strong, multi-layered melodic music, typically in minor key. And you take that one piece of music, which is something Augusti decided he would use at his swim starts. And he told Dane and I want this. I've got the DJ now. I've got the voice now. Let's get the music working. So from the movie Inception, and if you haven't seen the movie, watch it. It's a brilliant movie. And the soundtrack is by Hans Zimmer. And this particular track is called Time. And when that track starts, it does something to me. And it tugs on my heartstrings and it bypasses the brain. And I'm blessed that sometimes these words come out of my mouth and they resonate. And then you have social media and somebody decides to film it. And like some of the videos have more than 500,000 views. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I'm grateful because not only did I hopefully do something of meaning to the athletes in that moment on the beach, but through social media, it's reached hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who might also step back and go, maybe we would be better united than divided.
I think there'll be lots of saved starfish, Paul Kaye. Speaking of saved starfish and your own journey as an athlete, you mentioned that you've raced at Ironman Austria twice. You returned to racing this year. You were very excited to do a 4:18.4 along your journey to the Ironman 70.3 Knock Haste, which you did in August. You talk a lot about people's why. Tell me, what is your why?
Well, that depends on which why you're referring to, because I think we all have multiple whys. I got into doing sport as what the Germans like, and I love the term the Germans use, Hobbyathlete, a hobby athlete. And that's what I am. And it's actually tough to be that in our environment when essentially anybody who does an Ironman is in the 0.0001% of the fittest people on the planet. Only 5% of the global population ever have done a marathon. Imagine how few have done an Ironman. So I'm always reluctant to refer to myself as an athlete. But then when I look at my plastic tote at home of medals, I realize I only started being active in endurance sport from the age of 30. And I've done some amazing things. I've run the New York Marathon, San Francisco Marathon, London Marathon, 2 Ironmans, 2 7-day road bike stage races. I've had the privilege and the pleasure of doing some incredible things. And I think my why, sometimes when we start, our why is quite selfish or self-centered. Let's put it that way. My why originally was to be fit, to be a fit and participative father. That changed when my father died of cancer the month August is going to come up a lot. My birthday is in August. My mom and dad, their wedding anniversary was August. I was born on my parents' 6th wedding anniversary. My dad died 2 days before my parents' 42nd wedding anniversary, which was 2004. So 2 days before my 35th birthday. A year later, my first wife asked me for a divorce. I moved out of my family home, my wife and my 2 children, on my birthday in August in 2005. I got divorced in August 2006. And the loss of my dad, who was my best friend on this planet, and we worked together. We even shared an apartment together because my mum had a restaurant out in the country. My dad had his business in the city, and he worked in the city Monday to Thursday. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he was in the restaurant in the country with my mum. So I shared the apartment with him. I was his partner in his business. From the age of, 13, I was at all his gigs on weekends. When I finished a water polo match or a hockey match, I was the guy carrying the amplifier in and out of the car, and I'd sit at his gig and watch him play all days. I would go with him on business trips. So my dad and I, we were best friends. And losing my dad was brutal. He was only 66. I was 34, turning 35. It was absolutely brutal. The most painful thing. A year later, the separation, and then moving out of home, and then the divorce. But what was worse than all of that put together was my ex-wife telling me she was marrying her Danish colleague and leaving the country with the children. My son was 7, turning 8. My daughter was 14. Family, I come from a very, very, very loving, very close family. And this was giving permission for my children to leave the country was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life. But having to say goodnight to them on a telephone every day, and I phoned them every single day. I'd be at an Ironman, I'd walk away, I phoned them every single day. I took an extension on my bond, my mortgage, so that I could afford to go to Denmark to visit them. But whilst my dad was the most painful thing that ever happened to me, in inverted commas, losing my children was way more painful, because with death, there's a finality. The separation from your children is forever, in a way, and the pain doesn't go away. My son will be turning 25 next month. When I say goodbye to him, it hurts. And I've been saying goodbye to him since he was 7 years old. And then in those days, when I was commentating Ironman South Africa, you could come down the finish line with your kids. And I was struggling to cope with all of this. So I was kind of hitting the bottle really hard in the evenings. And I'd get to work. I had a really awesome job in sports publishing. I was publisher of Runner's World and bicycling magazines. And I would need 2 double espressos and a toasted ham and cheese sandwich to start my day. And then I quickly realized, this is not working. I decided I needed something that scared the living daylights out of me. And I decided to enter an Ironman. I'd never ridden more than 109 Ks on my bike. And I'd never swum more than a 600-meter sprint swim. Well, I'd done the Ironman 70.3. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do an Ironman. And my why was to run down the finish line with my children. And that why got me through a panic attack in the swim. That why got me through the most brutal marathon. And that why got me over the finish line. And that's why when I speak to the Nirvana guests, and even you might have heard in the second part of my opening soliloquy on Sunday in Kaye at Ironman Barcelona, I remind people, do not forget your why. And Joe, you will know this. You meet athletes all the time. People who've survived cancer, people who've lost somebody to cancer, people who've survived car crashes, given up smoking, lost a limb, survived a war. I've seen people with photographs of their children that they've lost sticky tape to the top tube of the bike. names written in permanent marker on the inside of their arms. There are so many incredibly powerful whys. And a lot of the whys we don't know because we don't see them. There are a lot of people, most people have an invisible why that they are coping with. Typically in Ironman, you'll see the person with the one limb or who's recovered from survived a war, PTSD or something. And that's take nothing away from that. Is incredible how they can inspire others to embrace their why and try something super difficult. But every one of those people standing on the beach has got a why. And my why helps me understand that they have a why. And that also tugs on the heartstrings and opens up the emotions that maybe helps me and other announcers elevate what we do such that it dignifies the occasion. The athletes get what they deserve, not what they think they need, but what they deserve.
And I think you make a very valid point there as well, Paul. You can see, you can see physical issues. You can see somebody will proudly tell you that they've fought cancer and they've come back from it. But what we don't see is the stories that aren't told and the obstacles and the challenges that people have to get to the start line, to even think about signing up to an Ironman 70.3. And even beyond that, like for some people to actually go out and run a 5K is their Ironman. That's their world championship. So I think one of the things that I always try to remember is that everyone has a story. And whilst we might have some of the publicly available stories through social media, or when we get to World Championships, we'll have the stories of the likes of Billy Munger, who's going to be racing in Kona with us during the week, and others, just to mention one, because he raced in the UK with us a few weeks ago. But it's the stories that we don't know. And I think we always have to be mindful of those stories that we don't know and the obstacles that people are overcoming to actually get to the start line. And that day of racing is the victory lap. And it's a long bloody day, Paul, for everybody, for everyone, spectators sometimes think they have the easier day, but they actually don't, and they're such a huge part of the community. So whilst we focus on the stories of the athletes, a lot of the times, sometimes those athletes are doing it for their supporters and their spectators. They want to be an ambassador for their family, for their community, to prove really that anything is possible.
The power of Ironman is that exactly that. Ironman allows ordinary people to be extraordinary and to prove that anything is possible. Because if you think about it, while from a distance, it looks near impossible, 2.4 miles or 3,800 meters swimming, most of the people on this planet don't even run that far. Then you still need to ride 112 miles, 180K. And then you need to run a marathon. And when you tell people who don't Ironman, they go, oh, how many days can you do that in? No, I'm sorry, it's maximum 17 hours. Some races, it's 15 hours, like Ironman Frankfurt, And the power of Ironman, the sport, is creating a platform for ordinary to be extraordinary. And the power it gives the individual to realize I can be and I can do so much more than I thought I could is one of the other things that I know you and I definitely love about the sport. And providing that platform for people. And people say to me also, why do you think Ironman's so popular? And I think that we live in an age where, generally speaking, we've all got a flat screen TV. We've all got, hopefully a decent roof over our heads, and we've got food on the table. And we're kind of all same. Ironman allows you to stand out and do something different. Hugely challenging, slightly scary, but not as scary as climbing Mount Everest or jumping out of an aeroplane. So it's a relatively safe challenge. And I believe anybody who does the work can finish the swim in 2 hours and 20 minutes, can finish the swim and the bike in 10 hours and 30 minutes, and can shuffle to the finish line in 17 hours. People don't think they can, but they can. And the more people that we get to do that, the more people will realize their personal power, the more they can be agents of positive change within their scope and sphere of influence.
So what's the best part of your job? Other than getting to work with myself and DJ Dane and so many wonderful people around the world, what is the best part of your job?
There's no single best part. We get to go to some of the most beautiful places on the planet. And we have We are not even inside the ropes. We are more than inside the ropes as witnesses on everybody's journey, professional and amateur. And just look at the professional races we get to witness. I mean, I still think back to Mark Allen grabbing me by the shoulders when we were standing, on Marine Drive in Port Elizabeth in 2018 at the Ironman 70.3 World Championship. And there was the battle between Jan Frodeno, Alistair Brownlee, and Javier Gomez. And Mark says, this is a watershed moment in our sport. In our sport. And you get to witness that. I mean, that's incredible. Although, let's quote Team A Team, that's unbelievable, So there are so many phenomenal aspects to the privilege of what I do for a living that I can call a job that I can't outline one of them. I work with amazing people. I work with amazing teams. I go to amazing places. I witness incredible athletes, professional and amateur. And I get to see unity. I get to see lives being changed. And I get to be inspired. And I get to call it a job. I mean, how cool is that? It's all amazing.
But then on the other side of it, Paul, there are times when it's a really long day, weather is horrendous, something maybe happens on a day that's unforeseen, that turns an event from the happy, exciting event that it is for somebody to a tragic incident, which can be really, really difficult for everybody involved. It's not all the glamour that it looks like it is when we're flying all over the world to different places and staying in beautiful hotels and all of that. So when you flip the coin a little bit, people often say to me, oh my God, it's such an amazing life and you're traveling all over the place and you're having so much fun. There are harder parts to the job as well. There's a lot of pressure at times. We're not neurosurgeons, but we do want to deliver amazing races for all those amazing athletes. So when you look at, I'm not going to say the most difficult part of the job, but what's the most challenging part of the job for you now? I mean, you're away from home for quite a bit, traveling around Europe, which is obviously really, really hard. But in terms of like a challenge as a job, because every job has a challenge and everyone faces that challenge differently. So for you, what would you say is the most difficult part?
Like with everything in life, it's never one thing. I mean, it's really hard being away from home as much as I am and for as long as I am. It's made even harder when the people you love the most need you and are maybe going through some of their challenges and you can't physically be there. So you're being there, but remotely via phone calls and WhatsApp. So that's really, really difficult. It's really difficult when we have tragic and unforeseen circumstances that we have to navigate. And as announcers, we are the face and the voice of the event and the brand in those moments. It's really difficult when you're having an off day, and you can have an off day. If you're a written journalist or a photojournalist or a video journalist, you can edit everything you do. As an announcer, we can't rewind. We can't take back. Everything we do is live and in the moment. And as you mentioned, we work under substantial pressure that nobody gets to see. External pressure from others, but pressure we put on ourselves because I know you and you know me, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to try and always be the best we can be. And what I did in Barcelona 2 weeks ago is gone. Saturday is a brand new day. You have to be amazing again, and you have to be more amazing than you were 2 weeks ago because as you raise the bar, so expectations are raised. So that's really, really hard. I think the hardest part of this job is when you can't make yourself emotionally available for whatever reason. Because I use the emotion of the moment and the emotion of the athlete and the emotion of the spectators, the music, my fellow announcers to fuel me and to help me get through those. And it's not 17 hours. We wake up at 4, we start speaking at 5 a.m. And on Saturday, I'm going to finish at 1:30 a.m., have a shower and go straight to the airport and start my journey to Kona without going to bed. And I'm not flying business class, economy the whole way. That's freaking hard. You cannot fake this job because people feel you. But when you do have to fake it, it's the longest day in the world. First time I announced Ironman Nice in 2011, my mom had been ill with cancer for the 3rd time. I knew her days were numbered. I knew it wasn't long. Kelly and I, we moved our wedding early enough so that we hoped my mum could make it. And fortunately, she managed to get out of hospital and she made it to the wedding, and we even danced and we had a wonderful time. And then I needed to go to Ironman Nice, 25th of June, 2011. And I knew my mom was really like, it was days, maybe weeks, possibly hours, but you don't know with cancer, right? And you don't know the person's fight. And my mom was a fighter and she'd lived way longer than my dad did from cancer. In those days, you walked from transition through the finish line down onto the beach to the swim start. It's not like where we have the swim start now when we host the World Championship. And I was walking through the finish line and Kelly called me and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Your mum's died." I knew it was coming. Didn't expect it to be then. I went to the side. I had a cry. Yves Cordier saw me crying. Stefan Petschnik, who was the CEO at the time, saw me crying. They both came up to me and said, "What happened?" Kelly told them. And they said, "Go back to your hotel." And I said, "Not a chance." My mom would not want that. My mom was very much, she came from a very big Catholic, very poor family. They lived by the grace of the church. The show must always go on. The show went on. I took a short break to phone my kids and tell my kids, and I went back to the finish line. The hardest finish line of my life was that finish line when I could not make myself emotionally available. So I couldn't feed off the moments. And there've been one or two times since, but when you can't be emotionally available, or if somebody takes the winds out of your sails, because what we do, as you well know, this is a confidence game, Yes, a lot of your confidence comes from within, but you also require external affirmation, if you can call it that. And you want to know that the people you're working with and working for want you to be there. And sometimes those people maybe have undue stress and then they have a go at you for about something, and that can completely take the wind out of your sails. When I was managing the radio station, I never, ever tackled my creative team, whether they're on the air or in the newsroom or wherever they were, whilst they were working. I always debriefed afterwards because I understood that it was a confidence game. But not everybody gets that. So if you can't be emotionally available, or if somebody takes the wind out of your sails, there's nothing more difficult than that.
Talk to me about racing in Belgium. I know you posted on social media, it was a swim, bike, run, fun day, and that's what you wanted. But talk to me about going back to racing, managing your training schedule with your tour schedule, and what was it like running down the finish line?
Firstly, thank you for the amazing send-off at the swim start. Thank you to you and my son and Hans for making sure Toto's Africa played. That swim start was beautiful. And thank you for the beautiful welcome you gave me on the finish line. It was very, very special. I was a bit broken, but it was spectacular. Taking nothing away from your job, Joanne, the highlight was my son medaling me.
Absolutely.
He ran down the finish line with me at my first Ironman, and there he was, many, many years later medaling me. But so COVID was brutal. Not many people realize, a lot of people think that you, like me, they think we're employed by Ironman. They don't realize we're freelancers. And as a freelancer, COVID, somebody just turned off the taps. There was no income for a year and a half, which was really, 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 really difficult. And in a way, when you love your job is part of your identity. And not being able to do your job really can mess with you. So COVID was challenging. But eventually I embraced COVID as a gift of time. It was a gift of time at home because I'm never at home. And once I embraced that, I actually enjoyed COVID other than being poor. But then, we all thought we'd come out of COVID and life's going to be amazing. My God, life was challenging the last half of 2021. 2022 was very challenging. 2022 was super challenging on a personal level back at home. Lots happened in my wife's life. A house caught fire. She lost her mum. She decided to change careers. 2022 was brutal. 2023 was very challenging for me on a professional level behind the scenes, which I won't go into. And what that made me decide was that often the best way to be mentally and emotionally strong is to be physically fit. I think you can achieve so much more when you're physically fit. So I decided that I needed a goal and I wanted to do an Ironman 70.3 again. I wanted a reason to train because it's too easy not to train with this lifestyle, with this travel schedule. Too easy not to train when I'm at home because I just want to be at home. So I thought, okay, I'm going to enter an Ironman 70.3. I'm starting training. And it really did kick my butt because I mean, I don't ever remember coming back from Ironman South Africa, landing, driving 2 hours home, lacing up my running shoes and going for a run. I don't ever remember running before the start of an Ironman 70.3. I ran on the morning of Ironman 70.3 Tillham's. So it changed my mental shift. What it also did was I've got a really bad back. I've got a protruding disc between my L4 and L5, and sometimes it'll touch a nerve and I'm man down. And being fit and strong reduces the risk of that happening. But it happened, and for 3 months, I couldn't train at all. All of February, all of March, all of April, I couldn't train, it set me back substantially in terms of my goal for Knocker Heist, because I had a time goal in mind, 2 time goals. My one goal was to beat my younger self, which I did, but I had another time goal, and I had to throw that.
Beat me, and did you beat me, Paul?
I beat you and I beat Jay Luke. Fastest announcer in 2024.
You had a flat course, though. I mean, it doesn't compare to me.
Go away, it was windy. You stop it. You were there.
It was flat.
Shush.
Okay, keep
doing
going.
19K an hour. It's very windy, Joanne.
You should have pushed more watts.
I wouldn't have been able to run.
Anyway, we digress.
So I had the sense that 2024 was not going to be an easy year. One has to be careful not to project and not to make a thought a reality, not to like construct it. But I sensed that 2024 might pose some challenges. And I felt that to be emotionally and mentally strong, I needed to be fit. And so that was one of my primary goals. I've achieved that goal, despite the setback of the back and despite a substantial travel schedule. I mean, people think it's easy to train. You can't ride a bike when your only off day is your travel day. All you're doing is traveling, and then maybe you have one day off before you start working again, and you can't travel with a bike everywhere you go. And I don't travel with a wetsuit. I travel with hand luggage only. So squeezing in the training was difficult, but I spend a lot of time on my own when I'm on tour, huge amount of time on my own. And the training has been a wonderful way to use that time instead of freaking scrolling or living on social media, which is, it's poison and it's the worst thing on this planet. And the training filled up a lot of time. It helped me be fit. It helped me raise a lot of money for charity, and the money's still coming in. I've got over 12,000 euro, almost $14,000 raised, and money's still coming in, thank goodness. And that was part of my why, to race for more than yourself. My why was to beat my younger self. I did a 70.3 when I was 34 years old. Now I'm 55. I beat that. And I got to the finish line, and my son medaled me, and I did smile. I did have a good time. And more than that, you can't ask for, really. So I had a good race in a great place. I had you there. I had my son there. Tick, 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 tick.
And I believe you're planning on racing again next year.
I think it would be wise to. I also noticed that doing the race made the athletes feel I was one of them. In a way, it kind of gives you a bit of credibility, and you think, why would I need that, right? I've been doing this for so long. But there's so many new athletes coming to the sport, and I think they respect that you can walk the walk and not just talk the talk. It also reminds one of what the athlete is going through, When I got to the porta potty at kilometer 18 because I needed a whiz and pure blood came out, that was freaking scary. But then I told myself, well, the medics are waiting at the finish line and it's 3K away. So what can you do? You have no choice. Just run a little bit faster, bro, to the finish line where the help is waiting for you. And so, these experiences are important. To go to a race briefing as an athlete, as opposed to somebody presenting it, is important. The nerves of the start line, but then also, that sound system wasn't really that great at the start. The announcers are struggling to get through to us as athletes. And it's really good to experience it from both sides. And it's just another arrow in my quiver that will hopefully help me always be a better announcer. And I think if I do it once a year, it also gives me a reason to get off my backside and to not sit in my hotel room in front of YouTube and rather go for a run. And the other thing it taught me is that with my bad back, if I go for a run in the morning and stretch well before a long travel day, my back copes on that long drive or on that long flight better. So I want to not be stupid. I want to take the learnings and apply them going forward. And so I think whilst I am able, I should race an Ironman 70.3 once a year.
And it's almost like having a review of yourself when you race. I don't know if you felt like that, but I definitely felt I wanted to feel what it was like to be on a start line again. I wanted to have the nerves. And your opening piece in Mallorca for my race, I'm going to use some Afrikaans that I've been taught. It was lekker brew. And then coming down the finish line was even more lekker, but to actually feel what it's like to be an athlete again, because we're so close to the athletes, but we're not racing. So you kind of feel like a bit of a fraud sometimes to be at a race.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, like exactly. That you're kind of telling the athletes, what it feels like. And as you mentioned, there's lots of repeat offenders in terms of athletes staying with Ironman as a lifestyle choice. But then you do have new athletes coming through and they're like, who's this one, Joanne Murphy or Paul Kaye? Do they even race? Do they even know what they're talking about? So for me, a huge part of racing Mallorca this year wasn't just to beat Jay Luke, and to have the fun with the Ironman UK team, but it actually was to hopefully inspire other people to race, to come back to triathlon if they haven't done it for a while, or to think that they could do it if they'd never done it, but actually to really feel what it was like, and then see, what the announcers are like as well, and see what it sounds like to be on the other side of it. And that's a huge part of it, I think, as well.
It's very important. And the other thing that I learned is that I can cope during the tough parts of a long Ironman announcing day better when I'm fit than when I'm not fit. And so fit's a relative term. You and I are off to Kona, and we're going to feel like the fattest, least fit people on the planet. That's what happens when you're at the World Championship in Nice, Kona, and Taupo. But I know that I'm way fitter today than I was this time last year or the year before. And I've enjoyed the benefits of being fit, and I want to continue to enjoy those benefits. Mm-hmm. It also helps you make better decisions. Like when I'm training, I'm a bit more circumspect when I'm at the hotel buffet. And so it's all good. There's no downside to it at all. And I'm not the kind of athlete, and I use that word, lightly. I'm not the kind of athlete who's hugely competitive and therefore will stop drinking completely. I need to make myself a nicer person. I need that glass of wine at dinner. I need to make sure that I can laugh at your terrible jokes, Joanne. So find that balance. But fitness is so, so important, and it just makes everything easier. So whilst I can, I want to try and race once a year, and I want to try and do a different race every year, different teams, different countries, different courses, because it's also part of the learning process. It all goes into that gray matter that's still working between the ears, and it influences my ability to do my job.
And also it provides the opportunity for us to actually test out the course ourselves so that we know what we're talking about. I know that we're talking about going for a little run at the Energy Lab in Kona.
Yes,
not
sure
whether that will happen or not, but I've been cramming my swimming because I'm definitely going swimming in the gorgeous warm waters of Kailua Bay. Speaking of Kona, Paul, and I'm really conscious of the time because we've been chatting for so long, this will be your 10th anniversary since you first stepped off the airplane in Kona Airport. How does it feel to be the lead announcer heading into the Ironman World Championship and to be the one now that will call the world champion down the finish line on Elite Drive?
Well, firstly, I had never actually thought about it being 10 years until you introduced me as such in Belgium at my race. And it's incredible how quickly it's flashed by. It's actually ridiculous. When I resigned my job in digital publishing in December 2009, Kelly said to me, "What on earth are you going to do?" And so I said, well, I'm going to see if I can turn my hobby into my career. And the great Phil Liggett is one of my mentors, and I can call Phil a friend, and Phil has taught me a huge amount. And I said, you have to have ambitious goals, right? And I said, both to the boss when I resigned, and he laughed at me, but he's since apologized. And to my wife, I said, what Phil Liggett is to cycling, I would like to be to triathlon. So that's a lofty goal. And I set myself 2 goals because I started professionally in 2010, that within 5 years, I want to be part of the team in Kona, the Ironman World Championship. And I want to be involved somehow in triathlon at the Olympics. I haven't cracked the Olympic code yet, but I cracked the nod for Kona in 2014. I was essentially a guest, and I was put on the hot corner with Mike Riley's son, Andy, the corner of Kuakini and Palani. And there I was. That was my first experience of the Ironman World Championship, Kailua Kona, 2014. Sebastian Kienle, the German, became Ironman World Champion. I think Rennie won it again as well. And it blew my mind. What blew my mind was not the magnitude of the event, because as you well know, Kona is much bigger in our minds for those of us that love the sport than it actually is as a town when you get there. But Kona is a place you feel. And you talked about, that plane. And I remember vividly, it's my outstanding memory. I always find that the Americans seem to have an air conditioning and ice fetish. And the plane was really, really cold. And when we landed, I had no idea what the airport would be like either. And then they open the door because there's no jetway. It's this ramp. It's not steps, it's this ramp. And as they opened the door, this beautiful, warm, scented, humid air rushed into the plane. I'm like, I got goosebumps. I'm like, wow, this is Kona. And it was just pinch me moments for a whole freaking week. Pinch me, pinch me, pinch me. Is this really happening? I arrived in the King Cam hotel, people, and Andrew Messick, the CEO, shouts across the lobby, "Hey, Paul Kaye, South Africa, welcome to Kona." And he takes me, I'm sitting side saddle on the back of a hotel bicycle, and we cycle to Huggo's for dinner, and he realized nobody there, and he cycles me back. This is the CEO cycling me on the back of his bicycle, sweating profusely, and we go back to the King Cam, and I sit down at the table with Queen of Kona, Pauline Newby-Fraser, Greg Welch, Dave Scott. Yeah, hello. It was insane. It was insane. It was mind-blowing. And I think what Kona is, it's not the place, it's the people. And it's not the physical place, it's the spiritual place. And the best endurance athletes, both professional and amateur, are all in one place at the same time. And because it's such a small place, it's so concentrated. And I didn't realize until you brought it up that, my goodness, that was 2014 and now it's 2024. And this is going to be my 10th Ironman World Championship, because even though we missed a year, we had 2022 when we did the double. And it is an extreme honor and a huge privilege. And I'm ridiculously blessed and fortunate to be part of the team, Joanne, to announce the Ironman World Championship. I don't enjoy being compared to Mike Riley. I think that's very unfair to him and to me. Mike Riley is Mike Riley. I'm Paul Kaye. You're Joanne Murphy. We are all hugely indebted to Mike for creating that space and for creating those 4 words, "You are an Ironman," that people want to hear. And that in itself, just those 4 words, are why we exist, why Ironman has announcers to say those words to people. And to be able to say it on a e-drive at the Ironman World Championship, in the sport of Ironman triathlon, there's no bigger stage and no greater privilege. And to be a part of the team that get to do that is hugely special.
And you will be the one that will call the 2024 Ironman World Champion across the finish line on Elite Drive. Have you even thought about that?
You know what? I haven't thought about it, and I'm not going to think about it, because often when you are the person doing something, when you're in that moment, you don't get to watch yourself do it, right? And like an Ironman, you only feel like you are an Ironman afterwards, and you only really enjoy the experience afterwards. I got to be there watching you on the carpet in that hot Hawaiian sun call Lucy Charles Barclay an Ironman World Champion. And in a way, it's being the witness and being the spectator, especially when you're inside the ropes, is so much. It's exciting. It's fun, You're not the one having to do the work. I'm not going to think about what it's going to feel like. I'm just going to focus on trying to be damn good at being me, and trying to be damn good at giving the moment the respect it deserves, and celebrating that athlete who in that moment is the best male professional in the world, the moment that athlete deserves. That's all I'm going to focus on because nothing else matters.
Will you be nervous?
Always, always nervous. On the 27th of April, exactly 4 years before South Africa voted for democracy, it was my first day on radio. And one of the DJs that I'd listened to for a long time that are hugely held in very high regard and respect came into the studio just before I went on air for my first show. And in those days, everything was on vinyl. And, you hold the needle of the record on your one finger and you gently lower it down onto the vinyl. And I'm right-handed. So he says to me, "Are you nervous?" And I show him my right hand and it's steady as a rock. And then I show him my left hand, which is shaking like crazy. And I said, "Can I quickly go to the bathroom? Because yes, I am that nervous." He says, "The day you lose the nerves is the day you stop."
Mm-hmm.
I'm always nervous, Joanne. I'm always nervous. When you pick up the mic for the first time, when you step onto the stage at the Ekomamai, at the welcome banquet, or at the banquet of champions, in those first moments, you're always nervous. But I think people like you and I, who do what we do, those nerves, we have a talent in a way where those nerves actually make our brains move at a speed and function at a level that allows us to somehow bring a little bit of a sparkling of that special magic dust. Some people, nervous shuts you down. I think nerves help me to operate at the level I need to operate at. But I do have that sick feeling in my stomach before the race starts. And I have that sick feeling in my stomach before the winner's going to come down the finish line. But then you get into your rhythm. And if you're not nervous, well, then you shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And we have a great team as well of announcers coming to Kona, yourself, Robson, Jay Style, we have Eric, and we have me. We also have our incredible DJ Dane Lee, who's going to Kona for the very first time.
So I've always been a huge believer in the power of team. I don't believe in the power of me. I believe in the power of we. I've always believed that. I would rather work with a strong team of average talented people than a team of superstars. And that's not making any reference to us. I think we're all incredibly good and I think we are the best of the best. But I've seen what happens in a team where you have one or two superstars and how it can break the team. And like I made reference to, so many things in my life have contributed and conspired to me being who I am today and where I am today. And I think my upbringing in Japan from the ages of almost 9 until the age of 13 influenced me so much without me realizing. I'm not a huge fan of certain Western capitalist attributes. I don't like the word hate, but I think here it's apt. I hate greed and I hate selfishness. And in Japan, I learned the power of we, not me. You can be the best in the world, but you can only rise as high as those around you. And if you're not able to bring them up and help them rise with you, you're not going to go very far. And what we do is so hard, it's made easier with a team of great people. And we inspire each other, we fuel each other, we give each other breaks. And there's only one human on this planet who was able to announce from when transition opens until the last athlete over the line. I don't know how he did it because I don't even think he even took a pee break.
Oh, he used to bring the microphone to the bathroom with him, I believe.
He has done that, and the mic was live, I heard. Or was that an urban myth?
I think that was a myth.
But, I having stood alongside Mike Riley from basically 2015 onwards, he's the only person I know who can do that and who could do it and not lose his voice and still deliver the energy and the power and the emotion behind the words, "You are an Ironman." If I had to, I would find a way to do that. But I don't believe I could deliver to the degree I feel I should deliver all on my own. And the power of team also brings different talents, different strengths, different tones. In radio, I always feared that too much of one voice eventually becomes white noise. And so having different voices with different tones and different textures makes sure that the spectator hopefully is always engaged and always listening. And the more engaged the spectator is, the more the spectator creates that moment and that energy of celebration. And in a way, the spectator does a lot of our job, because I still believe, and I maintain this, often people go, oh, you didn't say to me you are an Ironman. But you and I both know sometimes they come down the finish line, they're so destroyed, they don't even hear us, they don't even notice us. But what they remember is how they feel. And with our voices and with the right music and with the right engagement of the spectator, and by not shouting, by rather talking, because I believe when you shout at somebody, you're pushing them away. When you talk to somebody, they lean in, you're embracing them. And by using our voices and multiple energies, we can keep the spectator engaged for longer, and the spectator creates that energy of celebration. And that energy is what the athlete feels. And so I think that's an important recipe. And when we do that well, we're unparalleled.
And you're in Kona.
And then you add Kona to it, and you add the spiritual nature of Kona. And it is a spiritual place. And, I don't wish to offend anybody who's hugely religious, but, if triathlon was a religion, Kona is our church.
So moving on from Kona, I'm not going to ask you your predictions for Kona, because I think it's going to be an amazing race, a spectacular showdown, a spectacular showcase of the sport. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go across to our listener questions. And we did get quite a few. Now, some of them were very similar, so I'm just going to pick a couple of them. And we're going to start with Ed Buckley. Says, Paul is used to giving motivational speeches, but whose speeches inspire him?
Wow, that is good. So, in the time, we're so incredibly blessed in terms of the digital age has given us access to so much content. And there are some phenomenally inspiring people out there who have the ability to move others with their words, with their writing, with their photography, with their videography, with their music. And so I'm never inspired by just one thing. I'm very musical. I listen to a huge amount of music. Specifically, I listen to a lot of melodic jazz, Swedish trios and quartets. But I'm inspired all the time by people I meet, things I notice, by a quote I read, sometimes just scrolling through snippets from interviews with superstars. And one of the most inspiring things I heard recently was, he's a drummer, he's a phenomenal musician. He was being interviewed by Rick Beato, and his response was, thought is the killer of all flow. And when you think about that, that's quite profound. And I've tried to incorporate that into my announcing, because I need to believe that I have knowledge and I have the passion. If you can turn off the brain and bypass the thought part of the brain, often this can open up where deeper and more meaningful thoughts can come out in the form of inspirational words. So I find my inspiration, a lot of it on YouTube, on social media, in the people I meet, the music I listen to, and the books I read. No one thing.
And then favorite Ironman course, including those that have been discontinued. And that question comes from Elspeth Willow.
That's a difficult thing to answer, because being South African, I'm very biased towards Ironman South Africa, the original course. However, having raced Ironman Austria twice, my first and my second Ironman, and it was the first ever international race that I announced, and essentially the springboard for my career, it would be remiss of me not to say that I think Ironman Austria as a course and as a place scores extremely highly. It's a wonderful place as an athlete. It's a wonderful place to visit. It's a wonderful place to take your family and friends. It's affordable. It's beautiful. The people are amazing. So if I had to pick one, Ironman Austria.
It is a beautiful location, place, fantastic race. I was meant to race it back in 2014, but I got injured, never made it back. Anyway, we move on. Jay Luke has a question for you, Paul. He wants to know what your most memorable moment on the mic to date is.
Jay, I think you would understand, and so would all announcers who've worked at many, 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 many races, that it's near impossible to choose a moment, because for me, essentially, every finisher and every moment is a spectacular moment, because it's people doing incredible things. Wow. If I could look into the future, I cannot wait for the day I get to say to my son, Sebastian, you are an Ironman. And I think Mike Riley would agree, because when he called Andy an Ironman, it's hugely emotional and not much would top that. So, but I can't pinpoint, and I won't. It's like I don't do race predictions. I simply cannot choose one moment. There are so many spectacular moments that I've been privileged to witness and to call.
Jill Schroeder asks, where's the best gelato?
So Jill and Duggan are part of that club of a handful of athletes who've done every Ironman in the world, every current Ironman in the world, with Luis Alvarez, Jeff Jonas, Hugo Müller. So, and then also we had John Ragg and Elizabeth Modell, but now that they're injured, they're not doing all the races. So there are Ironman fanatics. And I bump into Jill and Duggan a lot. And at Ironman Hamburg, I actually nicknamed Jill. She's no longer Jill, she's Jill Latta, because she always wants to go and have ice cream somewhere, gelato. And I think the best ice cream has to be, where the name come from, has to be in Italy. But which is specifically the best spot? Well, that's now almost impossible. But my favorite is Main Road Greenpoint in South Africa, in Cape Town. It's called Gelato Mania, and it is spectacular.
There you have it. Any of the South Africans need some gelato, you know where to go. Paul, one final question, and this one is from me. When you look at your career and you look at your life in sport and your life in general, what would you say you are most proud of?
Most proud of? Wow. I always feared that I was average. And to give an example, we have a chain of stores in South Africa called Woolworths. They do food, but they also do clothing, similar to Marks and Spencer's in the UK. And I'm the kind of guy I could walk into Woolworths and I could grab a 32 slacks and they'd fit me perfectly. You know, the hem would be perfect length and it fit me around the waist, and a medium shirt will fit me. And I'm just like, firstly, I'm average height, average shoe size, average clothes fit me. And I kind of like always thought of myself as average. But when you hang around super high performing people, it's very easy to feel average. And I was a good DJ, but I wasn't the best DJ. And I was a good radio station manager, but I don't think I was the best radio station manager. And I was a good publisher, but I don't think I was the best. And I'm very happy that somehow I found the courage to see if I could turn my hobby of announcing into my living. And I think the fact that I'm part of the World Championship team means I'm not average. And I'm proud of that. I'm also proud of the fact that my son has decided that he wants to be fit and healthy and that he wants to work in the events game. And I think that's come from following me around the Ironman, following Kelly and I around the Ironman European Tour for every 8 weeks of his summer holiday from basically the age of, 14 till now, you know, and the fact that he loves sport and he wants to be fit. And I'm proud of that as well. And I think that's enough, really. That's special.
It certainly is. And it was absolutely special having you on the podcast. It's been lekker chatting with you for the past hour and a bit. And I can't wait to work with you again in Kona. And let's go and rock a Li'i Drive for all of those incredible athletes that are going to have some of their dreams come true on the Big Island.
Thank you for your time, Joe. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. Congratulations on being on the World Championship team and being the first woman who got to call the Ironman world champion on the finish line of a Li'i Drive. You beat me to it. I get to hopefully do it this year. I just want to tell people who are listening to your podcast, if you've never done an Ironman, consider it. It is life-changing. It changed my life, making it my profession. It'll change your life when you swim, bike and run.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. If you would like to hear more great episodes of the podcast, be sure to check them out on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow all of our activities and podcasts on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. If you have any feedback or guest suggestions, please email me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for listening, stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.